The lights went out at exactly 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night that would change two lives forever. In the elegant dining room of Le Bernardin, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, chaos erupted as emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across confused faces. Waitress Kira Johnson stood frozen near table 12, her hands trembling as she clutched a tray of champagne glasses, watching wealthy patrons panic in the sudden darkness. She had been working double shifts for 3 months straight, desperately trying to save money for her mother's heart surgery. The medical bills were crushing their small family and every tip mattered. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, she was serving the most important table in the restaurant. Billionaire CEO Brandon Torres and his fiancée Veronica Blackwell. "Stay calm, everyone," came a deep voice through the darkness. "The power will be restored shortly." Kira recognized the voice immediately. Brandon Torres, the 32-year-old CEO of Torres Enterprises, whose face graced magazine covers and business journals. She had studied his story during her lunch breaks, a self-made billionaire who built his empire from nothing. But right now, in the darkness, he sounded just like any other concerned person. Suddenly, she felt warm hands on her shoulders. Strong arms wrapped around her from behind in what felt like the most natural embrace she had ever experienced. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she felt his breath near her ear. "Thank God you're safe," Brandon whispered, his voice filled with genuine relief. "I was so worried when the lights went out. I love you so much, Veronica." Kira's body went rigid. He thought she was his fiancée. In the darkness, Brandon Torres, the most powerful man in the city, was holding her like she was the most precious thing in his world. His embrace was gentle yet protective, and for one impossible moment, she allowed herself to feel what it might be like to be loved so completely. The warmth of his chest against her back sent shivers down her spine. His cologne was subtle and expensive, nothing like the cheap aftershave her ex-boyfriend used to wear. But it was the tenderness in his touch that made her breath catch. This was how a man held the woman he loved. "The generator should kick in any moment," Brandon continued, his arms still around her. "You feel so tense. Are you hurt?" Kira knew she should speak up, should tell him about the mistake. But something held her back. Maybe it was the exhaustion from working 3 jobs. Maybe it was the fear about her mother's condition. Or maybe it was simply that no one had ever held her with such care. Through the darkness, she could hear other diners calling out to each other. The restaurant staff were trying to maintain order, but their voices seemed far away. In this bubble of mistaken identity, Kira felt safer than she had in months. Brandon's thumb gently stroked her shoulder. "Your dress feels different," he murmured, confusion creeping into his voice. "And your perfume." Panic shot through Kira. She wasn't wearing any perfume, she couldn't afford it. And her uniform was definitely not the designer dress Veronica Blackwell had been wearing. The emergency lights suddenly blazed to life, flooding the restaurant with harsh white light. Brandon's arms dropped from around her as if he'd been burned. Kira turned slowly, knowing that the magic of the moment was about to shatter. Brandon Torres stood before her, his dark eyes wide with shock. His usually perfect black hair was slightly disheveled, and his expensive suit jacket hung open. But it was his expression that made Kira's heart sink, confusion mixed with something that looked almost like disappointment. "You're not," he began, his voice trailing off. "I'm so sorry," Kira whispered, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "You were looking for Miss Blackwell. I'm just the waitress." But Brandon didn't look angry. Instead, he studied her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed. His gaze took in her warm brown skin, her natural hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her simple black uniform. She waited for the dismissal, for the cold treatment she was used to from wealthy customers. Instead, Brandon's expression softened. "Are you all right? You look shaken." "I'm fine," Kira lied, still trembling from the unexpected intimacy of the moment. "I should find Miss Blackwell for you. She must be worried." As if summoned by her words, Veronica's sharp voice cut through the restaurant's chatter. "Brandon, where are you? This is absolutely unacceptable. I demand to speak to the manager immediately." Brandon's jaw tightened at the sound of his fiancée's voice, but his eyes remained on Kira. "What's your name?" "Kira," she said quietly. "Kira Johnson." "Kira," he repeated as if testing how it sounded. "That's a beautiful name." Before she could respond, Veronica appeared beside them, her perfectly styled blonde hair still somehow flawless despite the chaos. Her ice blue eyes immediately zeroed in on Kira with undisguised contempt. "Brandon, what are you doing talking to the help?" Veronica's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "We need to leave immediately. This place is clearly not up to our standards." The power outage wasn't their fault, Brandon said mildly, but Kira caught the edge in his voice. I don't care whose fault it was, Veronica snapped. I refuse to stay in a place that can't even keep the lights on. And why is this waitress still standing here? Shouldn't she be cleaning up or something? Kira felt her face burn with humiliation. She started to step away, but Brandon's hand shot out, gently touching her arm. Wait, he said. Kira, are you hurt? You seem upset about something more than just the power outage. The kindness in his voice was almost too much to bear. Kira had grown used to being invisible to people like Brandon and Veronica. Wealthy customers rarely saw her as more than a means to an end. But Brandon was looking at her like she mattered. I'm just tired, she admitted. It's been a long day. How many hours have you been working? Brandon asked, ignoring Veronica's impatient huffing. Since 10 this morning, Kira said without thinking. But it's okay. I need the hours. Brandon's frown deepened. That's almost 11 hours. That can't be legal. Brandon. Veronica's voice rose dangerously. I'm not going to stand here while you chat with the staff. We have the charity gala tomorrow, and I still need to get my dress fitted. But Brandon seemed to have forgotten about Veronica entirely. His focus was completely on Kira, and she felt like she was drowning in the unexpected attention. You mentioned you need the hours, he said gently. Is everything all right at home? Kira hesitated. She had learned long ago not to burden customers with her personal problems. But something about Brandon's genuine concern broke down her usual defenses. My mother needs surgery, she found herself saying. Heart surgery. The insurance doesn't cover everything, and the hospital wants payment up front before they'll schedule the operation. Brandon's expression immediately grew serious. How much do you need? Brandon. Veronica grabbed his arm. We're leaving. Now. But Brandon gently removed Veronica's hand from his arm, never taking his eyes off Kira. How much? He repeated. $50,000, Kira whispered, the number sounding impossibly large when spoken aloud. But I'm not asking for help. I work extra shifts to save up. The amount was staggering to her, but she could see it meant nothing to Brandon. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. What's the name of the hospital? He asked, his fingers already moving across the screen. You can't be serious, Veronica said, her voice rising to a near shriek. Brandon, we are not giving money to some random waitress. Mount Sinai, Kira said, her heart pounding. But Mr. Torres, I can't accept. Yes, you can, Brandon said firmly, cutting off her protest. And you will. No one should have to watch their mother suffer because they can't afford medical care. He spoke quietly into his phone for a moment, then looked back at Kira. What's your mother's full name and date of birth? Kira stared at him in shock. Are you really? I'm really, Brandon said with a small smile that transformed his entire face. Your mother's surgery will be paid for in full by tomorrow morning. The hospital will call you to schedule it as soon as possible. Tears sprang to Kira's eyes. After months of desperate worry, of working herself to exhaustion, of lying awake at night fearing the worst, this stranger was offering her a miracle. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say you'll accept it gracefully, Brandon said. And maybe, would you consider having coffee with me tomorrow? I'd like to know more about you. Veronica's gasp was audible across half the restaurant. Have you lost your mind? She hissed. You're engaged to me, Brandon. You can't ask out the waitress. Brandon turned to Veronica with an expression Kira had never seen before. It was cold, calculating, and completely without warmth. You're right, he said quietly. I am engaged to you. But perhaps that's something we need to discuss. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Veronica's face went pale, then flushed red with rage. Fine, she snapped. If you want to throw away everything we have for some nobody, that's your choice. But don't expect me to stand here and watch. She turned on her designer heel and stalked toward the exit, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. Every eye in the restaurant followed her dramatic exit. Brandon watched her go without any visible emotion. Then he turned back to Kira, and his expression softened again. I'm sorry you had to witness that, he said gently. Mr. Torres, Kira began, but he held up a hand. Brandon, he corrected. And I meant what I said about coffee. If you're willing. Kira looked into his dark eyes and saw something she'd never expected to find their genuine interest. Not pity, not charity, but real curiosity about who she was as a person. I'd like that, she heard herself say. Brandon's smile was brilliant. Tomorrow at 10? There's a little cafe called Luna's on 5th Street. Do you know it? Kira nodded, not trusting herself to speak. This was impossible. This was a dream. CO billionaires didn't ask out waitresses. They certainly didn't pay for their mother's surgeries after knowing them for 10 minutes. I'll see you tomorrow then, Brandon said. He paused, then added softly, and Kira? That embrace in the darkness? I know it was a mistake, but it didn't feel like one. With that, he walked away, leaving Kira standing in the middle of the restaurant. Her entire world shifted on its axis. Around her, life continued as normal. Other waitresses cleared tables, customers finished their meals, and the emergency lighting was replaced by the regular fixtures. But nothing would ever be normal for Kira Johnson again. In the space of 20 minutes, a mistaken embrace had changed everything. Her mother would live. Her financial worries were over. And tomorrow she had a date with the most eligible bachelor in the city. She touched her shoulders where Brandon's hands had rested, and she could still feel the warmth of his touch. Whatever happened next, she would never forget this moment, the moment when a chance encounter in the darkness had illuminated a future she'd never dared to dream. Kira barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt Brandon's arms around her again, heard his voice whispering words of love meant for another woman. By 5 a.m., she gave up trying to sleep and sat at her tiny kitchen table, staring at her phone. The hospital had called at exactly 9:30 the previous evening. Her mother's surgery was scheduled for the following week, all expenses paid in full. The administrator had sounded almost giddy as she delivered the news, mentioning that the anonymous donor had also covered any potential complications or extended recovery time. Kira, honey, you look like you've seen a ghost, her mother, Patricia Johnson, said as she shuffled into the kitchen in her worn bathrobe. At 55, Patricia looked older than her years, the stress of her heart condition and financial worries having taken their toll. Mom, sit down, Kira said, her voice shaking. I have incredible news. She told her mother everything: the power outage, the mistaken embrace, Brandon's immediate generosity. Patricia listened in stunned silence, her hand pressed to her heart. A stranger paid for my surgery? Patricia whispered. $50,000? Just like that. Just like that, Kira confirmed. And Mom, he wants to have coffee with me today. Patricia's eyes narrowed with concern. Baby, rich men don't do things like this without expecting something in return. You be careful. I know it sounds crazy, Kira said. But Mom, you should have seen the way he looked at me. It wasn't predatory. It was kind. Kindness is good, Patricia said carefully. But kindness that comes with $50,000 attached makes me nervous. Promise me you'll meet him somewhere public. I promise, Kira said, then hesitated. Mom, what if this is real? What if he genuinely wants to get to know me? Patricia reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. Then you deserve it, baby. You've been working yourself to death trying to take care of me. You deserve someone who sees how special you are. At 9:45, Kira stood outside Luna's cafe, her heart hammering in her chest. She had changed clothes 4 times, finally settling on her only nice dress, a simple navy blue number she'd bought for job interviews. Her natural hair was styled in soft curls that framed her face, and she'd splurged on a tube of lip gloss from the drugstore. Through the large front windows, she could see Brandon already seated at a corner table. He was wearing jeans and a simple white button-down shirt, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. When he spotted her through the glass, his face lit up with a smile that made her knees weak. Kira, he said, standing as she entered. You look beautiful. Thank you, she said shyly. You look different without the suit. Better or worse? He asked with a grin. Different, she said diplomatically, making him laugh. He had already ordered for both of them coffee for him, tea for her, and an assortment of pastries that probably cost more than she usually spent on groceries in a week. I hope you don't mind, he said as they sat down. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I got a variety. This is too much, Kira protested. You've already done so much for my family. It's coffee and pastries, Brandon said gently. And I wanted to do something nice for you. When was the last time someone did something nice for you just because? Kira thought about it and realized she couldn't remember. For the past few years, every interaction had been transactional. She worked, people paid her, she used that money to survive. Acts of pure kindness were foreign to her world. I can't remember, she admitted. Something flickered in Brandon's eyes. That's going to change, he said quietly. They talked for 2 hours. Brandon asked about her life, her dreams, her goals. He listened when she told him about dropping out of college to care for her mother, about working multiple jobs to make ends meet, about her dream of someday finishing her business degree. What would you study if money wasn't an issue? he asked. Marketing, Kira said without hesitation. I love the psychology of it, understanding what motivates people to make choices. I used to read marketing textbooks from the library during my breaks. Brandon's eyes lit up. Torres Enterprises has an entire marketing department. Some of the best minds in the industry work for us. That must be fascinating, Kira said wistfully. It could be more than fascinating, Brandon said carefully. It could be your reality. Kira looked at him sharply. What do you mean? I mean I'd like to offer you a job, Brandon said. A real job, not just paying for your mother's surgery. Something with growth potential, benefits, a future. Mr. Torres. Brandon, he corrected gently. Brandon, she tried again. You can't keep doing this. You don't even know me. I know enough, he said firmly. I know you've been working 11-hour days to take care of your family. I know you're intelligent. The way you speak about marketing shows real insight. I know you're kind because you didn't get angry when I mistook you for someone else. And I know you're genuine because you keep trying to turn down my help. He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. Kira, I've spent my entire adult life surrounded by people who want something from me. Money, connections, status. Last night, you stood in that restaurant and told me about your mother's surgery, but you never once asked me for help. Do you have any idea how rare that is? I couldn't ask you for help, Kira said. We just met. Exactly, Brandon said. Most people would have started with a sob story the moment they realized who I was. You didn't? Even now, you're trying to talk me out of helping you. He reached across the table and gently covered her hand with his. The touch sent electricity up her arm. Let me help you, he said softly. Let me give you opportunities you deserve. Not because I feel sorry for you, but because I think you're extraordinary. Kira stared down at their joined hands. His skin was warm and slightly calloused despite his wealth, suggesting he wasn't afraid of hard work. What kind of job? She asked quietly. Marketing assistant to start, Brandon said. You'd work directly with our team on campaigns, learn the business from the ground up. Full benefits, tuition reimbursement if you want to finish your degree, and a salary that would let you take care of your mother without working yourself to death. Sounded too good to be true. What's the catch? Brandon's thumb stroked across her knuckles. No catch. Well, maybe one small one. Kira's heart sank. Here it was the condition that would make this impossible. I'd like to see you again, Brandon said. Outside of work. I know it's complicated because I'd technically be your boss, but Kira, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since last night. What about your fiancé? Kira asked, though her pulse was racing. Brandon's expression grew serious. Veronica and I had a long conversation after we left the restaurant. We've decided to end our engagement. Kira's eyes widened. Because of me? Because of how she treated you, Brandon said firmly. And because watching her dismiss you so cruelly made me realize I've never seen her show genuine compassion for anyone. I've been engaged to someone I don't actually like very much as a person. He squeezed her hand gently. But also because of you. Because in 20 minutes, you showed me more authenticity and grace than I've experienced in 2 years with Veronica. Brandon, this is moving so fast, Kira said, though she made no move to pull her hand away. It doesn't have to, he assured her. Take the job, it's yours regardless of anything personal between us. We can take the rest as slowly as you want. Kira looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity. This was insane. This was the plot of a romance novel, not real life. But her mother was going to live, and this man was offering her a future she'd never dared to imagine. Okay, she said quietly. Okay to the job? Brandon asked. Okay to all of it, Kira said, surprising herself with her boldness. Brandon's smile was radiant. Really? Really, she confirmed. But I have conditions. Name them. I want to earn my position, Kira said. I don't want special treatment because of whatever this is between us. If I'm not good at the job, I want you to tell me. Deal? Brandon said immediately. And I want to take things slowly with the personal stuff. I'm not used to this. She gestured vaguely between them. We'll go at whatever pace you're comfortable with, Brandon promised. And I want to pay you back for my mother's surgery, Kira said. It might take a while, but I want to pay you back. Brandon started to protest, but Kira held up her hand. It's important to me, she said firmly. All right, Brandon agreed. But interest-free, and you can pay me back $1 at a time if that's what you want. Thank you, Kira said, feeling tears prick her eyes again. For everything. I don't understand why you're doing this, but thank you. I'm doing this because you deserve it, Brandon said simply. And because that moment in the darkness last night? It was the most real thing I've felt in years. As they left the cafe together, Kira felt like she was walking in a dream. 24 hours ago, she had been an exhausted waitress facing an impossible situation. Now she had a new job, a new life, and the beginning of something that felt like it might be love. She thought about her mother's words that morning about rich men expecting something in return for their generosity. But looking at Brandon as he held the door for her, seeing the genuine warmth in his eyes, Kira realized that sometimes miracles really did happen. And sometimes they started with a mistaken embrace in the darkness. On Monday morning, Kira stood in front of the gleaming Torres Enterprises building, her stomach in knots. The 40-story glass tower stretched toward the sky, a monument to Brandon's success. She wore her best outfit, a black blazer and skirt she'd bought years ago for college presentations, paired with her only pair of professional heels. The lobby was all marble and chrome, with abstract art that probably cost more than her annual rent. Employees in expensive suits moved with purpose across the polished floors, their conversations filled with business jargon she barely understood. "You must be Kira Johnson," came a warm voice behind her. She turned to see an elegant woman in her 40s approaching, her silver hair styled in a chic bob. She wore a beautiful burgundy dress that screamed high-end designer. "I'm Catherine Williams, head of human resources," the woman said, extending her hand. "Brandon asked me to personally handle your orientation." "It's nice to meet you," Kira said, trying to project more confidence than she felt. As they rode the elevator to the 20th floor, Catherine chatted easily about the company culture and what Kira could expect in her new role. But Kira caught the curious glances, the way Catherine seemed to be evaluating her. "I have to ask," Catherine said as they stepped off the elevator, "how do you know Brandon? He was very specific that you should receive the best possible orientation and support." Heat crept up Kira's neck. "We met at a restaurant where I was working. He offered me this opportunity." Catherine's eyebrows rose slightly, but she simply nodded. "Well, you must have made quite an impression. Brandon doesn't typically get involved in hiring at this level." The marketing department was bustling with activity. Open workspace areas were filled with young professionals working on campaigns, while glass-walled offices housed the senior staff. Everyone looked polished and educated in ways that made Kira feel like an imposter. "Kira Johnson, everyone," Catherine announced to the room. "She's joining us as our new marketing assistant." A few people looked up with polite smiles, but Kira caught some puzzled expressions. She was clearly different from the typical Torres Enterprises hire, younger, less polished, without the invisible markers of privilege that seemed standard here. "Let me introduce you to your supervisor," Catherine said, leading her to a corner office where a woman in her 30s sat behind a massive desk covered in campaign materials. "This is Jennifer Chin, our marketing director," Catherine said. "Jennifer, this is Kira Johnson." Jennifer looked up from her computer, her expression neutral but not unfriendly. She had the sharp, efficient look of someone who had climbed the corporate ladder through sheer competence. "Welcome to the team," Jennifer said, standing to shake Kira's hand. "I understand you have some marketing background?" "Some college coursework and self-study," Kira said honestly. "I'm eager to learn." "Good," Jennifer said. "We'll start you off with some basic campaign analysis and see how you do." "Catherine mentioned that Mr. Torres specifically requested you for this position?" There was a question in Jennifer's voice that made Kira's cheeks burn. She could see the woman trying to figure out the connection, probably wondering if Kira was someone's daughter or niece. "He felt I might be a good fit for the team," Kira said carefully. "I'm sure you will be," Jennifer said, though her tone suggested she was reserving judgment. The morning passed in a blur of orientation materials, system passwords and introductions to team members. Everyone was polite but distant, clearly waiting to see what she was capable of before making any real effort to include her. At lunch, Kira sat alone in the company cafeteria, picking at a salad that cost more than she used to spend on 3 meals. She was beginning to wonder if she'd made a mistake accepting Brandon's offer when a familiar voice made her look up. "How's your first day going?" Brandon stood beside her table, looking immaculate in a charcoal gray suit. Several nearby conversations stopped as people noticed the CEO in the cafeteria, apparently not a common occurrence. "It's been informative," Kira said diplomatically. Brandon slid into the seat across from her, ignoring the stares from other diners. "Just informative? That doesn't sound very encouraging." "Everyone's been very nice," Kira said, not wanting to complain on her first day. "But," Brandon prompted, clearly reading her hesitation. "But I think they're wondering why you hired someone with my limited experience," she admitted. I can see them trying to figure out who I am and why I'm here. Brandon's jaw tightened slightly. Are people making you feel unwelcome? Not unwelcome exactly, Kira said quickly. Just curious, and maybe a little skeptical. You know what? Brandon said, pulling out his phone. I think it's time to address this directly. What are you doing? Kira asked, alarmed. Setting up a meeting, Brandon said as he typed. I want to introduce you properly to the senior staff. Make it clear that you're here because of your potential, not because of any personal connection. Brandon, no, Kira said urgently. That'll just make it worse. People will think. People will think what they want to think regardless, Brandon said firmly. But they'll treat you with respect if they know I value your contributions to this company. Before Kira could protest further, Brandon's assistant appeared at their table, a efficient-looking man in his 20s who somehow managed to look both deferential and harried. Mr. Torres, the assistant said, I've scheduled a department head meeting for 3 o'clock to introduce Miss Johnson and discuss her role in upcoming projects. Perfect. Thank you, Michael, Brandon said. Then, to Kira's horror, he added, also, please arrange for Miss Johnson to have access to our corporate education program. I want her enrolled in advanced marketing courses immediately. Of course, sir, Michael said, making notes on his tablet. Anything else? Yes, Brandon said, his eyes never leaving Kira's face. I want Miss Johnson to have a proper office. Something on the 19th floor with the other senior marketing staff. Brandon, Kira hissed, mortified. You can't just. I can and I am, Brandon said calmly. Michael, also arrange for Miss Johnson to attend the Rivera account presentation on Friday. She'll be contributing to the campaign strategy. Michael nodded and disappeared, leaving Kira staring at Brandon in shock. Are you out of your mind? She whispered. I've been here 4 hours and you want me working on major accounts? I want you challenged, Brandon said. I've seen how smart you are, Kira. Shuffling papers and making copies isn't going to develop your talents. What if I fail? Kira asked, panic rising in her voice. Then you fail, Brandon said simply. And then you learn from it and do better next time. That's how everyone learns. He reached across the table and touched her hand gently. I believe in you. The question is, do you believe in yourself? Kira looked down at their joined hands, acutely aware of the curious stares from around the cafeteria. By tomorrow, everyone in the building would be talking about the new marketing assistant who had lunch with the CEO on her first day. This is moving too fast, she said quietly. Maybe, Brandon agreed. But good things don't always wait for us to be ready for them. Sometimes we have to jump in and figure it out as we go. That afternoon, Kira found herself in a conference room full of department heads, each one more intimidating than the last. Brandon introduced her as a promising new addition to the marketing team, someone he expected great things from. Miss Johnson will be working on the Rivera campaign with Jennifer's team, Brandon announced. I want her involved in all strategic discussions. Kira caught Jennifer's surprised expression and felt her stomach drop. She was being set up to fail and everyone in the room knew it. But Brandon's confidence in her was unwavering. Over the following days, he continued to shower her with opportunities and support. He arranged for her to shadow senior executives, enrolled her in online courses, and made sure she had access to resources that would normally take years to earn. Why are you doing all this? Kira asked him after a particularly overwhelming day of training sessions and meetings. They were standing in his office as the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Brandon had asked her to stay late to discuss her progress, but the conversation had turned personal. Because I see something in you that you don't see in yourself yet, Brandon said, moving to stand beside her at the floor-to-ceiling windows. You have instincts, Kira. Natural ability that can't be taught. Or maybe you're just being kind because you feel sorry for me, Kira said, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her all week. Brandon turned to face her, his expression serious. Do you really think I'd risk my company's reputation on pity? I don't know, Kira said honestly. This is all so far outside my experience. Look at me, Brandon said gently, waiting until her eyes met his. I didn't build a billion-dollar company by making emotional decisions. Everything I do is calculated, strategic. If I'm investing in you, it's because I believe you'll give me a return on that investment. And if I don't? Then I'll have been wrong, Brandon said. But I'm rarely wrong about people. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Besides, he said softly, my interest in you isn't purely professional anymore. Kira's breath caught. Brandon? I know we agreed to take things slowly, he said, reaching up to gently touch her cheek. But I need you to know that everything I'm doing for you comes from a place of genuine caring. Not pity, not guilt, but real affection for the woman you are. I care about you too, Kira admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But this is all so overwhelming. A week ago I was serving tables and now I'm in strategy meetings for million-dollar campaigns. And you're brilliant at it, Brandon said firmly. Jennifer told me your insights on the Rivera campaign were some of the best she's heard from a junior staff member. Kira's eyes widened in surprise. She did. She did, Brandon confirmed. You're not here because I feel sorry for you, Kira. You're here because you belong here. As they stood there in the fading light, Kira felt something shift inside her. For the first time since accepting Brandon's offer, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she really could build the life he was offering her. Thank you, she said softly, for believing in me before I believed in myself. Brandon's smile was tender. That's what people do when they care about each other. They see the best in each other even when we can't see it ourselves. The moment was interrupted by a sharp knock on the office door. Brandon's assistant entered, looking apologetic. Mr. Torres, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Miss Blackwell is here to see you. She says it's urgent. Brandon's expression immediately hardened. Tell her I'm in a meeting. I already told her that, sir, but she insisted. She said she's not leaving until she speaks with you. Brandon looked at Kira apologetically. I should handle this. Can we continue this conversation tomorrow? Of course, Kira said, gathering her things. I should get home anyway. My mother will be wondering how my first week went. As Kira left Brandon's office, she could hear Veronica's angry voice echoing down the hallway. Whatever the former fiancé wanted, it didn't sound pleasant. But for the first time since this whole adventure began, Kira wasn't worried about the complications. She was beginning to understand that Brandon's generosity wasn't charity, it was investment. And she was determined to prove that his faith in her wasn't misplaced. 2 weeks into her new job, Kira was beginning to find her rhythm at Torres Enterprises. Her office on the 19th floor was modest but professional, with a view of the city that still took her breath away every morning. She had thrown herself into learning everything she could about marketing strategy, often staying late to review campaign materials and industry reports. You're becoming quite the workaholic, Jennifer observed, stopping by Kira's office at 7 p.m. on a Thursday evening. The cleaning crew is going to start charging you rent. Kira looked up from the market research she'd been analyzing. I want to make sure I understand the Rivera project completely before tomorrow's presentation. Jennifer sat down in the chair across from Kira's desk, her expression thoughtful. Can I give you some advice? Please, Kira said, grateful for any guidance. You don't have to prove yourself every single day, Jennifer said gently. I know there's been some speculation about how you got this position, but your work speaks for itself. That consumer behavior analysis you did last week was graduate-level work. Thank you, Kira said, feeling a warm glow of pride. That means a lot coming from you. I'll be honest, Jennifer continued, when Brandon first told me about you, I was skeptical. We don't usually hire people without traditional marketing backgrounds. But you have something that can't be taught, genuine insight into how people think and feel. Kira had been working on a campaign for a new line of affordable luxury skincare products, and her research had revealed something the senior team had missed. Their target demographic wasn't just interested in the products themselves, but in the feeling of treating themselves to something special without financial guilt. I think I understand it because I've been that customer, Kira said. I know what it's like to want something nice but have to think twice about every purchase. Exactly, Jennifer said. That authenticity is rare in our industry. Most of us have been insulated from real financial pressure for so long that we forget what it's like. As if summoned by their conversation, Brandon appeared in the doorway. He was loosening his tie, looking tired but pleased. Working late again? He asked, though his tone was fond rather than disapproving. We were just finishing up, Jennifer said, standing. Kira's presentation for tomorrow is excellent. The Rivera team is going to be impressed. After Jennifer left, Brandon came into Kira's office and perched on the edge of her desk. How are you feeling about tomorrow? He asked. Nervous, Kira admitted. It's my first big presentation to external clients. You'll be wonderful, Brandon said confidently. But you should go home and get some rest. You've been putting in 12-hour days. Says the man who's still here at 7 p.m., Kira pointed out. Touché, Brandon said with a grin. But I don't have a presentation tomorrow that could launch my career. The weight of that statement settled between them. This was a big opportunity and they both knew it. If Kira impressed the Rivera executives, it would go a long way toward establishing her credibility at the company. Brandon, Kira said hesitantly, are people still talking about us? Brandon's expression grew serious. Some people will always talk. Does it bother you? Sometimes, Kira said honestly. I hear whispers in the elevator, see people looking at me differently when they think you and I are, whatever we are. What do you want us to be? Brandon asked softly. It was a question they'd been dancing around for weeks. They had dinner together twice a week, long conversations in his office after work, and a growing intimacy that felt both natural and terrifying. But they hadn't defined their relationship, hadn't even kissed despite the obvious attraction between them. I want to be someone who earned her place here, Kira said carefully. And I want to be with you. But I'm scared those two things are incompatible. Brandon slid off the desk and moved around to her side, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. Listen to me, he said, taking her hands in his. You have earned your place here. Every insight, every idea, every late night you've spent learning this business, that's all you. I may have opened the door, but you walked through it and made it your own. But people will always wonder. Let them wonder, Brandon said firmly. The people whose opinions matter, Jennifer, the other department heads, the clients, they're judging you on your work. And your work is exceptional. He brought her hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was tender and intimate, sending warmth shooting up her arms. As for us, he continued, I don't want to pressure you. But I also don't want to pretend I don't have feelings for you just to make other people comfortable. What kind of feelings? Kira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The kind that make me look forward to seeing you every day, Brandon said. The kind that make me want to share my successes with you and help you through your challenges. The kind that make me think about a future that includes both of us. Kira's heart hammered against her ribs. Brandon, I'm falling in love with you, he said simply. I've been falling since that night in the restaurant when you tried to give back the help I offered. You're kind, intelligent, determined, and beautiful inside and out. I know it's complicated and I know people will judge us, but I can't pretend I don't feel what I feel. Tears pricked Kira's eyes. No one had ever spoken to her with such complete sincerity, such open vulnerability. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. It scares me how much. Brandon's smile was radiant. He reached up to cup her face, his thumb gently wiping away a tear that had escaped. It scares me too, he admitted. I've never felt this way about anyone before. With Veronica, everything was calculated, strategic. This is the opposite of that. This is terrifying and wonderful and completely beyond my control. They sat there for a moment, the weight of their confessions settling between them. Finally, Brandon stood and offered her his hand. Come on, he said. Let me take you home. Tomorrow's a big day and you need to rest. As they rode the elevator down together, Kira felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. Her mother's surgery was scheduled for the following week, her career was taking off, and the man she was falling in love with felt the same way about her. There's something I want to ask you, Brandon said as they reached the lobby. What's that? After your mother's surgery, when she's recovered, would you like to meet my family? Brandon asked. I've told them about you, and they're very curious to meet the woman who's captured my attention so completely. Kira's stomach fluttered with nerves. Your family knows about me? My parents and my sister, Brandon confirmed. They know you're special to me. What did you tell them about how we met? Kira asked, worried about their reaction to the unconventional beginning of their relationship. The truth, Brandon said simply. That I mistook you for someone else in the dark, and that mistake turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. Outside the building, Brandon's driver was waiting with the sleek black car that still made Kira feel like she was living in someone else's life. I can take the subway, she offered as she always did. Absolutely not, Brandon said as he always replied. It's late and I want to make sure you get home safely. During the ride to her apartment, Brandon took her hand, intertwining their fingers. The simple contact sent electricity through her entire body. Kira, he said softly, I want you to know that regardless of what happens between us personally, your job is secure. You've proven yourself and you belong at Torres Enterprises. Thank you, she said. That means everything to me. When they reached her building, Brandon walked her to the door like he always did. But tonight felt different. Tonight, with their feelings out in the open, the air between them crackled with possibility. Good luck tomorrow, he said, stopping just outside her building. Thank you, Kira said. For everything. For the opportunity, for believing in me, for falling in love with you? Brandon asked with a soft smile. For letting me fall in love with you, Kira corrected. Brandon's expression grew tender. He reached up to touch her face, his fingers trailing along her cheek. Can I kiss you? He asked softly. Kira's breath caught. Yes, she whispered. Brandon leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. When his lips finally touched hers, it was gentle and sweet, a promise rather than a demand. Kira felt like she was melting from the inside out, every nerve ending singing with joy. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Wow, Kira whispered. Wow indeed, Brandon agreed, resting his forehead against hers. I've been wanting to do that for weeks. I'm glad you waited, Kira said. Tonight was perfect. Get some sleep, Brandon said, pressing another gentle kiss to her lips. Tomorrow you're going to show the Rivera team why I knew you were special from the very first moment I held you in my arms. As Kira watched his car disappear into the night, she touched her lips where he had kissed her. Everything in her life was changing so fast it sometimes felt like she was living in a dream. But standing there on the steps of her apartment building, she knew this was real. Tomorrow she would present her first major campaign. Next week her mother would have the surgery that would save her life. And sometime soon she would meet the family of the man she was falling in love with. For the first time in her adult life, Kira Johnson felt like the future was full of infinite possibilities. The Rivera presentation was a resounding success. Kira's consumer insight research had identified a gap in the market that the client hadn't even realized existed, and her recommendations for targeting working mothers who wanted to feel pampered without overspending resonated perfectly with their goals. Outstanding work, said Maria Rivera, the company's CEO, as she shook Kira's hand after the presentation. Your understanding of our target demographic is exactly what we needed. I look forward to working with you on this campaign. As the Rivera team filed out of the conference room, Kira felt like she was floating. Jennifer beamed at her from across the table, while the other senior marketing staff nodded their approval. But it was Brandon's proud smile that made her heart soar. I told you so, he said quietly as they gathered their materials. You did, Kira agreed, still somewhat dazed by her success. I can't believe they actually liked my ideas. They didn't just like them, Jennifer interjected. They loved them. Maria Rivera is notoriously difficult to impress, and you had her taking notes throughout your entire presentation. Over the following weeks, Kira threw herself into the Rivera campaign with enthusiasm. She worked closely with the creative team to develop advertisements that spoke to real women's experiences, not just idealized versions of luxury. Her background gave her insights that the team's previous work had lacked. You have a gift for this, said Tom Mitchell, the creative director, during one of their brainstorming sessions. Most marketers think they understand consumers, but you actually do understand them. I've been one of them, Kira said simply. I know what it's like to want something beautiful but have to count every dollar. The campaign they developed was groundbreaking in its authenticity. Instead of glossy models and impossible situations, they featured real women working mothers, college students, young professionals enjoying small moments of luxury that felt achievable rather than aspirational. Meanwhile, her relationship with Brandon continued to deepen. They had dinner together several times a week, sometimes at expensive restaurants but more often at quiet little places where they could talk without interruption. Brandon was endlessly curious about her thoughts and opinions, treating her insights with the same respect he showed his senior executives. Tell me about your childhood, he said one evening as they shared dessert at a cozy Italian restaurant near her apartment. Not much to tell, Kira said. Mom raised me alone after my father left when I was 8. We didn't have much money but we had each other. That must have been difficult, Brandon said gently. It was, Kira admitted. But it also made us close. Mom worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat and I helped however I could. I think that's why this job means so much to me. I finally feel like I can take care of her the way she took care of me. Brandon reached across the table to take her hand. She did an amazing job raising you. You're the most grounded person I've ever met. What about your family? Kira asked. You mentioned them before but you don't talk about them much. Brandon's expression grew complicated. My parents are intense. My father built the foundation of what became Torres Enterprises, and my mother is from old money. They have very specific expectations about everything business, relationships, social obligations. Are you worried about introducing me to them? Kira asked, trying to keep her voice light. I'm worried they won't appreciate how wonderful you are, Brandon said honestly. They tend to judge people based on background and connections rather than character. Maybe we should wait, Kira suggested, though the thought of meeting his family terrified and intrigued her in equal measure. No, Brandon said firmly. I'm not hiding you from them and I'm not hiding them from you. They're part of my life, which means they need to accept that you're part of my life too. The conversation was interrupted by Kira's phone buzzing with a text message. She glanced at it and felt her blood run cold. What is it? Brandon asked, noticing her expression. It's the hospital, Kira said, her voice shaking. My mother's surgery has been moved up. They want her there tomorrow morning. Brandon immediately signaled for the check. We need to go. You'll want to spend tonight with her. I'm scared, Kira admitted as they waited for his car. What if something goes wrong? What if the surgery doesn't work? Brandon pulled her into his arms right there on the sidewalk, holding her close as she trembled with fear and anxiety. She's going to be fine, he said firmly. Your mother is strong and she has the best surgical team in the city. And no matter what happens, you won't face it alone. Promise? Kira whispered against his chest. Promise, Brandon said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. They spent the evening at Kira's apartment with her mother, Patricia. Brandon had met her briefly when he'd stopped by to check on Kira one day, but this was the first time they'd had a real conversation. Mr. Torres, Patricia said as she served coffee in her small living room, I want to thank you again for what you've done for us. I don't know how we'll ever repay you. You don't need to repay me, Brandon said gently. And please call me Brandon. Brandon, Patricia said with a smile. Can I ask you something? Of course. What are your intentions with my daughter? Patricia asked directly, making Kira cringe with embarrassment. Mom, Kira protested. It's all right, Brandon said, his expression serious. Mrs. Johnson, I love your daughter. I intend to do everything in my power to make her happy and support her dreams. Patricia studied him for a long moment. She's been taking care of everyone else her whole life. It's time someone took care of her. I couldn't agree more, Brandon said. Later, as Brandon prepared to leave so Kira could spend the night with her mother, he pulled her aside. I've arranged for the best cardiac surgeon in the state to oversee your mother's operation, he said quietly. And I'll be at the hospital tomorrow whether you want me there or not. You don't have to, Kira began. Yes, I do, Brandon said, cutting her off. You're important to me, which means your mother is important to me. I'm not letting you go through this alone. The next morning, Kira sat in the surgical waiting room, her hands shaking as she watched the clock. Brandon had arrived at 6 a.m. with coffee and pastries, though neither of them had much appetite. She's been in there for 3 hours, Kira said, pacing by the windows. How long is this supposed to take? These things take time, Brandon said calmly, though she could see the worry in his eyes. The surgeon said it could be 4 to 5 hours. Jennifer appeared in the waiting room around noon, carrying flowers and a concerned expression. I hope you don't mind me coming, she said to Kira. Brandon told me about your mother's surgery and I wanted to show support. Thank you, Kira said, touched that her supervisor had taken time away from work to be there. That means so much. Other colleagues began arriving throughout the afternoon, people from the marketing department, Brandon's assistant Michael, even some executives Kira barely knew. By evening, the waiting room was full of people who cared about her, creating an impromptu support network she'd never experienced before. I've never had anything like this, Kira told Brandon as they watched her co-workers chatting quietly and sharing food they'd brought. People who barely know me taking time out of their day to be here. They know you, Brandon said firmly. They see what I see, someone worth caring about. When the surgeon finally emerged at 7 p.m., Kira's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst. Dr. Peterson looked tired but smiled as he approached. The surgery was a complete success, he announced, and Kira felt her knees buckle with relief. Brandon's strong arms caught her immediately. She's going to be fine, Dr. Peterson continued. The repair went perfectly and I expect a full recovery. She should be able to go home in a few days. The waiting room erupted in quiet cheers and applause. Kira found herself crying tears of relief as people she'd only known for a month hugged her and celebrated her mother's successful surgery. Can I see her? Kira asked. She's still sedated, but you can sit with her for a few minutes, Dr. Peterson said. Brandon squeezed her hand. Go. I'll be right here when you get back. Patricia looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, but her color was already better than it had been in months. Kira held her mother's hand and whispered words of love and gratitude. When she returned to the waiting room, most of her colleagues had gone home, but Brandon was still there, reading a book in the uncomfortable plastic chair. How is she? He asked, standing immediately. Perfect, Kira said, fresh tears streaming down her face. She's going to be perfect. Brandon pulled her into his arms, and she finally let herself fully feel the relief and gratitude that had been building all day. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. For everything. For the surgery, for being here, for bringing all these people who care about me. I don't know what I did to deserve all this. You deserve everything good in the world, Brandon said firmly. And I intend to spend a very long time making sure you get it. As they left the hospital together that night, Kira realized that her life had completely transformed in the space of 2 months. She had a career she loved, a mother who would live to see her grandchildren, and a man who loved her enough to move mountains for her happiness. The scared, exhausted waitress who had been working triple shifts to save for her mother's surgery felt like a different person entirely. In her place was a confident woman who was beginning to believe she deserved the abundance that had come into her life. And it had all started with a mistaken embrace in the darkness. Patricia's recovery was swift and remarkable. Within a week, she was home and stronger than she had been in years. The successful surgery had given both women a new lease on life, and Kira threw herself into her work with renewed energy and confidence. The Rivera campaign launched to widespread acclaim. The authentic approach Kira had championed resonated with consumers in ways that surprised even the client. Sales exceeded projections by 30% in the first month, and industry publications began featuring articles about Torres Enterprises' innovative marketing strategies. You're becoming quite the celebrity, Jennifer told Kira as she showed her a feature article in Marketing Week that specifically mentioned Kira's consumer insights work. It feels surreal, Kira admitted, reading the article for the third time. 6 months ago, I was serving coffee to people who work in marketing. Now I'm apparently revolutionizing it. Not apparently, Jennifer corrected. You are revolutionizing it. That authenticity you bring is changing how our entire department approaches campaigns. But with success came scrutiny. Kira began noticing whispers in the hallways that stopped when she approached, speculative looks from colleagues, and pointed questions about her rapid rise within the company. Don't let it get to you, Brandon advised during one of their evening dinners. Success always breeds jealousy. It's not just jealousy, Kira said carefully. People are saying I'm only successful because I'm sleeping with the CEO. Brandon's fork clattered against his plate. Who's saying that? It doesn't matter who, Kira said quickly. What matters is that it's affecting my credibility. Some of the junior staff won't take direction from me because they think I'm just your girlfriend playing at having a career. That's ridiculous, Brandon said angrily. Your work speaks for itself. Does it? Kira asked. Or does it just look good because you've given me every possible advantage? The question hung between them like a challenge. Brandon reached across the table for her hand, but she pulled back slightly. Kira, you earned every opportunity you've been given, he said firmly. Have I? She asked. Really? Or have I just been the beneficiary of your feelings for me? Before Brandon could answer, a familiar voice cut through the restaurant's ambient noise like a knife. Well, isn't this cozy? They both turned to see Veronica Blackwell approaching their table, resplendent in a designer dress that probably cost more than Kira's monthly salary. Her ice blue eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. Veronica, Brandon said coolly, not bothering to stand. I thought you were in Europe. I was, Veronica said, her gaze fixed on Kira with undisguised contempt. But I heard such interesting news that I simply had to come back and see for myself. She turned to address Kira directly. So you're the little waitress who's been playing house with my ex-fiancé. How charming. Veronica, that's enough, Brandon warned, his voice low and dangerous. Oh, I'm just getting started, Veronica said with a cold smile. Do you want to tell her, Brandon, or shall I? Tell me what? Kira asked, her stomach clenching with dread. Veronica pulled out her phone and showed them a photo that made Kira's blood run cold. It was a picture of her and Brandon kissing outside her apartment building, but it had been doctored to make it look more intimate than it actually was. This is going to be on the front page of tomorrow's business section, Veronica said with satisfaction. Along with a very interesting article about nepotism and favoritism at Torres Enterprises. Brandon stood so abruptly that his chair nearly toppled over. You vindictive. Careful, Brandon, Veronica interrupted smoothly. We wouldn't want to make a scene in front of your little pet project. Get out, Brandon said, his voice deadly quiet. Now. Oh, I'm going, Veronica said. But the damage is already done. By tomorrow morning, everyone will know exactly how the poor little waitress really got her big break. She leaned down to whisper something in Kira's ear that made her face go pale, then straightened with a triumphant smile. "Enjoy your dinner," she said sweetly, then swept out of the restaurant like a queen dismissing her subjects. "What did she say to you?" Brandon asked immediately, sitting back down and reaching for Kira's hands. Kira shook her head, unable to repeat Veronica's cruel words about being Brandon's charity case and social experiment. "It doesn't matter," she said quietly. "What matters is that she's right about one thing. Everyone is going to see that article and think the worst." "Who cares what people think?" Brandon said fiercely. "We know the truth." "Do we?" Kira asked, her voice breaking slightly. "Brandon, be honest with me. If we had met under normal circumstances, if I had been just another marketing professional at a networking event, would you have been interested in me?" Brandon's hesitation lasted only a split second, but it was enough to shatter something inside Kira's chest. "That's not a fair question," he said finally. "We didn't meet under normal circumstances. We met the way we met, and that's part of our story." "That's not an answer," Kira said, pulling her hands free from his. "You fell in love with the idea of rescuing me, didn't you? The poor waitress who needed saving." "That's not true," Brandon protested. "I fell in love with your intelligence, your kindness, your determination. All things you discovered after you'd already decided to save me," Kira pointed out. "Brandon, you paid for my mother's surgery before you even knew my last name. Because it was the right thing to do." "No," Kira said sadly. "Because you're a good man who saw someone in need and wanted to help. But that's not the same thing as love, and it's not the same thing as respect." She stood up from the table, her legs unsteady. "I need some time to think." "Kira, please," Brandon said, standing as well. "Don't let Veronica poison what we have." "She didn't poison anything," Kira said. "She just forced me to see what was already there." Over the next few days, the business press had a field day with the story. The photos of Kira and Brandon together were everywhere, accompanied by speculation about impropriety and favoritism. Editorial writers questioned whether Torres Enterprises' recent success was based on merit or romance. The office atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Kira could feel eyes on her wherever she went, hear conversations stop when she entered a room. Some colleagues offered support, but others made their skepticism clear through cold shoulders and pointed comments. "This will blow over," Jennifer assured her during a private meeting. "Office gossip always does." "But what if it doesn't?" Kira asked. "What if I've damaged the company's reputation? What if clients start questioning the validity of our work?" "The Rivera campaign speaks for itself," Jennifer said firmly. "Results matter more than gossip." But Kira wasn't convinced. When the Rivera executives requested a meeting to discuss recent developments, she knew her worst fears were being realized. The meeting was brutal. Maria Rivera, who had been so enthusiastic about Kira's work just weeks before, now questioned whether the campaign's success was due to Kira's insights or Brandon's influence. "We need to be assured that our marketing strategy is based on professional expertise, not personal relationships," Maria said bluntly. Kira sat through the meeting with burning cheeks, defending her work while knowing that her credibility had been irrevocably damaged. No matter how good her results were, there would always be whispers about how she'd really achieved them. That evening, Brandon found her in her office long after everyone else had gone home. She was staring out the window at the city lights, her face reflected in the dark glass. "The Rivera meeting didn't go well," he said, sitting down across from her desk. "No, it didn't," Kira agreed without turning around. "They're questioning everything, my qualifications, my insights, even whether the campaign's success is legitimate." "I'll talk to them," Brandon said immediately. "I'll explain." "No," Kira said firmly, finally turning to face him. "Don't you see? That would just prove their point. Every time you defend me, every time you intervene on my behalf, it reinforces the idea that I can't succeed on my own." Brandon's expression was pained. "So what do you want me to do? Pretend I don't care about you?" "I want you to let me handle this myself," Kira said. "I want to prove that I can succeed or fail based on my own merit, not because I'm under your protection." "And us?" Brandon asked quietly. "What happens to us while you're proving yourself?" Kira felt tears threaten. "I don't know. Maybe Veronica was right. Maybe this was all a mistake from the beginning." "Don't say that," Brandon said urgently, standing and moving around the desk toward her. "What we have is real, Kira. It's the most real thing in my life." "Is it?" Kira asked, stepping back before he could touch her. "Or is it just a beautiful fantasy we both got caught up in?" The pain in Brandon's eyes was almost too much to bear. "You're really going to let them destroy what we've built together?" "I'm trying to save it," Kira said desperately. Don't you see? If we keep going like this, I'll always be the charity case who got lucky. I need to prove to myself and to everyone else that I'm more than that. How? Brandon asked. How do you prove something that's already been proven? By stepping away from you, Kira said, the words tearing her heart in half. By showing that I can succeed without your help. That's not necessary, Brandon protested. We'll weather this storm together. No, Kira said firmly. We won't. Because together we'll always be the billionaire and his pet project. Apart, I might actually have a chance to be someone worth loving for who I am, not who you helped me become. The silence stretched between them, filled with all the things they couldn't say. Finally, Brandon nodded, his jaw tight with suppressed emotion. If that's what you need, he said quietly. But this isn't over, Kira. What we have isn't something you just walk away from. Maybe not, Kira agreed. But maybe it's something worth fighting for properly. After Brandon left, Kira sat alone in her office and cried for the first time since her mother's surgery. She was walking away from the man she loved in order to find out if she was worthy of his love. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done, but she knew it was the only way forward. Tomorrow she would start proving herself all over again. But this time she would do it entirely on her own terms. The weeks following Kira's decision to step back from Brandon were the most challenging of her professional life. She threw herself into work with singular focus, determined to prove her worth beyond any shadow of doubt. The whispers and speculation continued, but she refused to let them derail her career. I want to take on the Patterson account, she told Jennifer during their weekly one-on-one meeting. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. That's our most difficult client. They've rejected the last 3 campaign proposals we've presented. Exactly, Kira said. If I can crack Patterson Industries, no one can say I succeeded because of personal connections. Patterson's CEO is notoriously demanding, Jennifer warned. Harold Patterson built his company from nothing and expects perfection from everyone around him. He's made grown men cry in meetings. Then I'll have to make sure I don't give him a reason to make me cry, Kira said with determination. The Patterson Industries account was indeed a nightmare. The company manufactured industrial equipment, and their previous marketing campaigns had been sterile and forgettable. Harold Patterson himself was a gruff man in his 60s who had no patience for what he called marketing nonsense. Kira spent 2 weeks researching everything about Patterson Industries, their history, their competitors, their customer base, and most importantly, their founder's story. She discovered that Harold Patterson had started the company in his garage after being laid off from a factory job, building it through sheer determination and quality craftsmanship. You want to focus on nostalgia? Jennifer asked when Kira presented her initial concepts. For industrial equipment? Not nostalgia, Kira corrected. Heritage. Pride in American manufacturing. The story of a man who believed in making things that last. Her campaign concept centered around the idea that Patterson Industries didn't just manufacture equipment, they manufactured reliability. The tagline she proposed was simple but powerful, built to last, built to matter. The day of the Patterson presentation, Kira felt more nervous than she had since her first day at Torres Enterprises. She knew that Brandon would normally attend such an important client meeting, but true to their agreement, he had stayed away. This was entirely on her. Harold Patterson sat at the head of the conference table like a skeptical judge, his weathered hands folded as he listened to her presentation. His expression gave nothing away as she walked through her research, her insights, and her proposed campaign. Ms. Johnson, he said when she finished, his gravelly voice cutting through the silence. Do you know what I hate most about marketing people? Kira's heart sank, but she kept her expression steady. What's that, Mr. Patterson? They try to sell me on fancy ideas without understanding what I actually do, he said. They talk about brand synergy and customer engagement like they're magic spells. Yes, sir, Kira said, unsure where this was going. But you, Harold continued, you did your homework. You understand that I'm not selling widgets, I'm selling the promise that when someone buys my equipment, it'll still be running 20 years from now. He leaned forward, his eyes sharp with interest. Tell me, how did you know to focus on heritage instead of innovation? Because innovation is what your competitors are selling, Kira said, finding her confidence again. But heritage is what you have that they don't. You've been keeping American factories running for 30 years. That's not just a business, that's a legacy. Harold Patterson smiled for the first time since she'd met him. You're hired, young lady. And I want you personally overseeing this campaign, not some junior account manager. As the Patterson team filed out of the conference room, Jennifer turned to Kira with amazement. In 15 years of working with Patterson Industries, I've never seen Harold warm up to anyone that quickly. He just needed someone to listen to his story, Kira said, though she was internally celebrating her victory. Word of the Patterson success spread quickly through the office. Suddenly, colleagues who had been treating her with skepticism were approaching with congratulations and requests for collaboration. The whispers about her relationship with Brandon were replaced by discussions of her innovative marketing strategies. "I heard you tamed the Patterson Dragon," said Michael Santos, one of the senior account executives who had been notably cool toward her since the Veronica incident. "That's seriously impressive." "Thank you," Kira said, appreciating the genuine respect in his voice. Over the following weeks, other challenging clients specifically requested to work with Kira. Word spread through the industry that Torres Enterprises had a marketing strategist who could connect with difficult customers and understand their real needs. "You're building quite a reputation," Jennifer told her as they reviewed Kira's rapidly expanding client portfolio. "Marketing Magazine wants to do a profile on you." "Really?" Kira asked, still amazed by how quickly her professional standing had shifted. "Really? They're calling you the client whisperer because of your ability to understand what customers actually want versus what they say they want." The success felt different from her early achievements at Torres Enterprises. This time, she knew without a doubt that she had earned every accolade through her own abilities. No one could question whether she deserved her success or attribute it to personal relationships. But the professional triumph was bittersweet. As her career soared, her personal life felt empty. She missed Brandon terribly, missed their long conversations about everything and nothing, missed the way he listened to her ideas with complete attention, missed the warmth of his hand in hers. She saw him around the office occasionally, always professional and cordial but maintaining the distance she had requested. Sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, pride mixed with longing and something that might have been regret. "You look miserable," her mother observed during one of their weekly dinners. Patricia was fully recovered from her surgery and back to her old self, which meant she didn't hesitate to speak her mind about her daughter's love life. "I'm not miserable," Kira protested. "I'm focused on my career." "You can be focused on your career and still be happy," Patricia pointed out. "That young man made you light up like Christmas morning. Now you look like someone stole your favorite toy." "It's complicated, Mom," Kira said. "Love usually is," Patricia replied. "But that doesn't mean you should run away from it." "I'm not running away," Kira said defensively. "I'm proving that I can succeed on my own." "Honey," Patricia said gently, "you've proven that 10 times over. The question is, what are you going to do with that proof?" The question haunted Kira as she continued building her reputation. She was featured in industry publications, invited to speak at marketing conferences, and headhunted by competing firms. Her success was undeniable and entirely her own. But late at night, alone in her apartment, she found herself wondering what good professional success was if she couldn't share it with the person who mattered most to her. The breaking point came when she received an offer from a prestigious marketing firm in Los Angeles. The salary was substantial, the opportunities were endless, and it would put 3,000 miles between her and the complicated situation she'd created with Brandon. "It's an incredible opportunity," she told Jennifer when she brought her the offer letter. "It is," Jennifer agreed. "And I'd hate to lose you. You've become one of our most valuable assets." "But," Kira prompted, hearing the hesitation in her supervisor's voice. "But you'd be running away from something that might be worth fighting for instead," Jennifer said carefully. "I've watched Brandon Torres for 5 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." "He looks at me with pity," Kira said bitterly. "No," Jennifer said firmly. "He looks at you with love. And lately he looks at you with the kind of sadness that comes from losing something precious." That evening, Kira sat in her office staring at the Los Angeles offer. It was everything she thought. She wanted a chance to start fresh, to build a career without any complicated history, to prove herself in a new environment where no one knew her story. But as she looked out at the city lights, she realized that running away to Los Angeles wouldn't solve anything. It would just mean she'd spent the rest of her life wondering what might have been if she'd been brave enough to fight for what she really wanted. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, scared, exhausted, working multiple jobs just to survive. That woman would have been grateful for any opportunity, would have jumped at the chance for a fresh start. But she wasn't that woman anymore. She was someone who had built a reputation on her own merit, who had proven her worth beyond any doubt. She was someone who had earned the right to make choices based on what she wanted, not what she thought she deserved. And what she wanted was Brandon. The realization hit her like lightning. She had spent months proving she could succeed without him, but she had never stopped to ask herself why that mattered if she couldn't be happy without him. She picked up her phone and typed a message before she could lose her nerve. "Can we talk?" His response came within minutes. "My office. Now." As Kira walked through the empty halls toward Brandon's office, her heart hammered with nervous anticipation. She had spent months building walls between them in the name of proving her independence. Now it was time to see if those walls could be torn down. It was time to fight for what really mattered. Brandon's office was dimly lit when Kira arrived, only his desk lamp cutting through the darkness. He stood silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared out at the city skyline. He didn't turn around when she entered, but his shoulders tensed slightly. "Close the door," he said quietly. Kira did as he asked, then stood uncertainly near the entrance. The distance between them felt like a chasm that had grown wider with each passing week of professional politeness and careful avoidance. "I got a job offer," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Now Brandon did turn, his dark eyes finding hers immediately. "Congratulations." "Where?" "Los Angeles. Henderson and Associates. It's a senior marketing position with a substantial salary increase." "That's what you wanted," Brandon said carefully. "To prove you could succeed anywhere on your own terms." "Yes," Kira agreed. "It is." They stared at each other across the expensive Persian rug that dominated his office floor. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they'd been afraid to say for months. "When do you start?" Brandon asked finally. "I haven't accepted it yet," Kira said quietly. Something flickered in Brandon's expression, hope, maybe, or surprise. "Why not?" "Because I realized something tonight," Kira said, taking a step closer to his desk. "I've been so focused on proving I could succeed without you that I never stopped to ask myself if I wanted to." Brandon's jaw tightened. "And what's your answer?" "I don't want to succeed without you," Kira said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I don't want to build a career in a place where you're not part of my life. I don't want to achieve everything I've dreamed of if I can't share it with the person I love." "Kira?" Brandon began, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Let me finish," she said. "I was terrified that people would think I only succeeded because of my relationship with you. But tonight I realized that I was really terrified of something else entirely." "What?" Brandon asked softly. "I was terrified that you might be right about me," Kira admitted. "That I might actually be extraordinary enough to deserve the love of someone like you." Brandon moved around his desk slowly, deliberately, until he was standing just an arm's length away. "You are extraordinary," he said firmly. "You always were. I just helped you see it." "I know that now," Kira said. "The Patterson account, the industry recognition, the job offers, I earned all of that. But more importantly, I learned something about myself." "What's that?" "That I'm brave enough to fight for what I want," Kira said, looking directly into his eyes. "And what I want is you. Not your money, not your connections, not the opportunities you can provide. Just you. The man who held me in the darkness and made me feel safe. The man who saw potential in me when I couldn't see it myself. The man who believed in me enough to let me prove my worth, even when it meant stepping away from him." Brandon's expression had shifted from guarded hope to something much more intense. "Do you mean that?" "I mean it," Kira said without hesitation. "I love you, Brandon. Not because you rescued me, but because of who you are. Because you're kind and generous and brilliant. Because you make me laugh and challenge me to be better. Because when I'm with you, I feel like the best version of myself." "Kira," Brandon said, reaching up to cup her face in his hands. "I've been miserable without you." "Good," she said with a watery smile. "I've been miserable too." "I should have fought harder for us," Brandon said, his thumb stroking across her cheekbones. "I should have ignored your request for space and made you listen to reason." "No," Kira said firmly. "You did exactly what I needed you to do. You let me find my own strength. You trusted me enough to let me prove myself even though it meant risking losing me." "I was never going to lose you," Brandon said with quiet confidence. "I knew you'd come back to me eventually." "How could you be so sure?" Kira asked. "Because what we have is real," Brandon said simply. "And real love doesn't just disappear because the circumstances get complicated." He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When his lips met hers, it was like coming home after a long, difficult journey. Kira melted into his embrace, her arms winding around his neck as months of suppressed longing poured out between them. "I love you," Brandon murmured against her lips. "I love your intelligence and your determination and your incredible heart." I love the way you see the world and the way you make me want to be a better man. I love you too, Kira whispered back. So much that it scared me. Don't be scared anymore, Brandon said, pulling back to look into her eyes. We're going to figure this out together. People will still talk, Kira warned. Let them talk, Brandon said with a shrug. Your reputation speaks for itself now. Anyone who questions your abilities is just jealous of your success. The Los Angeles offer. Kira began. Turn it down, Brandon said immediately. Stay here. Build your career here with me. What if it gets complicated again? Kira asked. What if working together becomes a problem? Then we'll handle it, Brandon said confidently. Together. The way we should have handled it from the beginning. He walked over to his desk and pulled out a small velvet box that made Kira's breath catch. I bought this 3 months ago, he said, returning to stand in front of her. I've been carrying it with me every day, waiting for the right moment. Brandon, Kira gasped, her eyes wide with shock. I know it's fast, he said, dropping to one knee right there in his office. I know we've only known each other for 6 months, but I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life loving you, supporting your dreams, and building something beautiful together. He opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring that caught the light from his desk lamp and threw rainbows across the office walls. Kira Johnson, he said formally, will you marry me? Yes, Kira said without hesitation, tears streaming down her face. Yes, absolutely yes. Brandon slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around his office as she laughed with pure joy. When? He asked when he finally set her down. When what? Kira asked, dizzy with happiness. When will you marry me? Brandon clarified. Tomorrow? Next week? I don't want to wait any longer than necessary. Soon, Kira promised, admiring the way the diamonds sparkled on her finger. But first I want to meet your family. And I want to tell my mother. She already knows, Brandon said with a grin. What? Kira asked in surprise. I asked for her blessing 3 months ago, Brandon admitted. She told me I was an idiot for not proposing immediately. You asked my mother for permission to marry me? Kira asked, touched by the old-fashioned gesture. I asked for her blessing, Brandon corrected. You don't need anyone's permission to make your own choices. But I wanted her to know how serious I was about loving her daughter. What did she say? She said you deserved someone who would love you exactly as you are, Brandon said. And then she told me I'd better treat you right or she'd have to hurt me. Kira burst into laughter. That sounds like Mom. I'm going to treat you right, Brandon promised solemnly. I'm going to love you and support you and celebrate every success with you. I'm going to be your partner in everything. And I'm going to love you back, Kira said. Through every challenge and every triumph. Through board meetings and family dinners and quiet Sunday mornings. Quiet Sunday mornings sound perfect, Brandon said, pulling her close again. As they stood there in his office, holding each other as the city sparkled below them, Kira marveled at how completely her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been a struggling waitress with no prospects and crushing debt. Now she was an accomplished marketing executive engaged to the love of her life. But more than the external changes, she had discovered something precious about herself. She had learned that she was worthy of love not because she had been rescued, but because she was inherently valuable. She had proven to herself and to the world that she could achieve anything she set her mind to. No more running away, Brandon said as if reading her thoughts. No more running away, Kira agreed. From now on we face everything together. Together, Brandon confirmed, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted like forever. The announcement of Kira and Brandon's engagement sent shockwaves through both the business world and high society. The trade publications had a field day with the story of the billionaire CEO and his former waitress fiancée, while society pages speculated about everything from wedding dates to prenuptial agreements. Torres Enterprises stock actually went up 3 points after the engagement announcement, Jennifer told Kira with amusement. Apparently investors think you're good for business. That's bizarre, Kira said, still adjusting to the idea that her personal life could affect stock prices. It's actually not that strange, Jennifer explained. Brandon's been more focused and successful since you've been in his life. Smart investors recognize that happy CEOs make better business decisions. The positive market reaction was encouraging, but Kira knew the real challenges were just beginning. She had yet to meet Brandon's family, and she suspected they would be far less enthusiastic about the engagement than Wall Street investors. My parents want to have dinner with us tomorrow night, Brandon told her as they reviewed wedding venue options in his apartment. Fair warning, they're going to be Intense. What kind of intense? Kira asked, looking up from the portfolio of exclusive venues his wedding planner had provided. The kind that comes from generations of old money and social expectations, Brandon said carefully. They're not bad people, but they have very specific ideas about appropriate matches for their son. And I'm not what they had in mind, Kira said. It wasn't a question. You're better than what they had in mind, Brandon said firmly. You're real and genuine in ways they've never experienced. Once they get to know you, they'll love you as much as I do. The next evening, Kira dressed carefully in a conservative navy dress and pearls, trying to strike the right balance between professional and approachable. Brandon's parents lived in an elegant townhouse on the Upper East Side that reeked of old money and older traditions. Margaret Torres was a perfectly preserved woman in her early 60s, with silver hair styled in an immaculate chignon and the kind of posture that suggested finishing school. Richard Torres was tall and distinguished, with Brandon's dark eyes and the bearing of a man accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Mother, father, Brandon said as they were shown into the formal living room, I'd like you to present Kira Johnson. Miss Johnson, Margaret said coolly, extending a manicured hand. How lovely to finally meet you. Thank you for having me, Kira replied politely. Your home is beautiful. It's been in Richard's family for 4 generations, Margaret said, the comment clearly designed to emphasize the difference in their backgrounds. Dinner was an exercise in subtle interrogation disguised as polite conversation. Richard asked pointed questions about Kira's education and family background, while Margaret made observations about social obligations and charitable commitments that came with being a Torres. Brandon tells us you work in marketing, Richard said as they finished the main course. That must be interesting. I find it fascinating, Kira said, refusing to be intimidated. Understanding what motivates people to make choices, connecting with their real needs rather than their perceived wants. It's psychology and strategy combined. And you're quite successful at it, I understand, Margaret said, though her tone suggested she found this somehow surprising. I've been fortunate to work on some successful campaigns, Kira said modestly. Fortunate? Brandon interjected. Kira revolutionized our approach to the Rivera account and personally landed the Patterson Industries contract. Fortune had nothing to do with it. His parents exchanged a look that Kira couldn't interpret. Brandon has always been generous in his assessment of people, Margaret said carefully. The comment hung in the air like an accusation. Kira felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger, but she kept her expression calm. I understand your concerns, she said directly to both parents. You're wondering if I'm marrying your son for his money, and if he's marrying me out of some misguided sense of charity. Margaret's perfectly controlled expression flickered with surprise at Kira's directness. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending those questions haven't occurred to me too, Kira continued. 6 months ago I was working 3 jobs just to survive. The idea that I could be worthy of someone like Brandon seemed impossible. And now? Richard asked, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp with interest. Now I know that I love your son for who he is, not what he can provide, Kira said firmly. I've built my own career, earned my own reputation and proven my own worth. I don't need Brandon's money or status. I choose to be with him because he makes me a better person, and I hope I do the same for him. Brandon reached over and took her hand, squeezing gently. As for Brandon, Kira continued, he didn't fall in love with a project or a charity case. He fell in love with a woman who challenges him, supports him and shares his values. Our relationship isn't based on what we can do for each other financially, it's based on who we are when we're together. Margaret and Richard sat in silence for a long moment, processing this unexpected speech. Finally Richard spoke. You're very direct, Miss Johnson. I believe in honesty, Kira said. Especially about important things. And what could be more important than our son's happiness? Margaret added, her tone considerably warmer than it had been all evening. The atmosphere shifted after that. Richard began asking Kira genuine questions about her work and her insights into consumer behavior. Margaret shared stories about Brandon's childhood and expressed interest in Kira's plans for their wedding. There is one concern we need to address, Richard said as they moved to the sitting room for after-dinner drinks. What's that? Brandon asked, immediately alert. Veronica Blackwell has been making the rounds at social events, spreading rather unpleasant stories about your relationship, Richard said carefully. She's suggesting that Kira deliberately set out to break up your engagement. That's ridiculous, Brandon said angrily. Veronica and I were already having problems before I met Kira. We know that, Margaret said. But others might not. Veronica can be very convincing when she wants to be. What kind of stories? Kira asked, dreading the answer. She's claiming that you researched Brandon's routine and deliberately placed yourself in his path that night at the restaurant, Richard explained. She's suggesting the whole thing was an elaborate setup. Kira felt sick. People believe that? Some do, Margaret admitted. Veronica has always been skilled at social manipulation. We'll handle Veronica, Brandon said grimly. Actually, Kira said slowly, I have a better idea. 3 days later, Kira stood at the podium of the Grand Ballroom at the Plaza Hotel, addressing an audience of New York's business and social elite at the annual Children's Healthcare Charity Gala. Brandon had suggested they make a public appearance together to counter Veronica's rumors, but Kira had proposed something more strategic. Thank you all for supporting such an important cause, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the elegant ballroom. As someone who has experienced firsthand the challenges of affording quality healthcare, I understand how critical these funds are for families in need. She could see Veronica sitting at a prominent table near the front, her expression carefully neutral but her eyes glittering with malice. 6 months ago, I was working as a waitress trying to save money for my mother's heart surgery, Kira continued. I was terrified, exhausted and running out of options. Then I met Brandon Torres under the most unusual circumstances. A murmur of interest rippled through the audience. Everyone had heard various versions of their meeting, but this was the first time either of them had addressed it publicly. It was during a power outage at Le Bernardin restaurant, Kira said with a smile. In the darkness, Brandon mistook me for someone else and embraced me. It was a case of mistaken identity that changed both our lives. She went on to tell their story honestly, Brandon's immediate generosity, her initial reluctance to accept help, their growing connection, and her determination to prove herself professionally. Some people have suggested that our meeting was somehow orchestrated, Kira said, her eyes finding Veronica's table. That I deliberately placed myself in Brandon's path for personal gain. I want to address that directly. The ballroom fell completely silent. On the night we met, I was exhausted from working an 11-hour shift, Kira said. I was earning minimum wage plus tips, wearing a uniform that cost more than I could afford, and thinking about nothing except getting home to check on my mother. The last thing on my mind was romance, let alone strategic relationship planning. A few people in the audience chuckled at her dry delivery. Brandon fell in love with me not because I manipulated him, but because I didn't, Kira continued. In a world where he's constantly surrounded by people who want something from him, I was someone who kept trying to give his generosity back. That authenticity is what caught his attention, and it's what built our relationship. She could see heads nodding throughout the audience, people responding to her honesty. Tonight, we're here to support children who need medical care their families can't afford, Kira concluded. Brandon and I are donating $1 million to this cause, not for publicity or social credit, but because we understand how terrifying it is to watch someone you love suffer while feeling powerless to help. The announcement of their substantial donation drew enthusiastic applause, but Kira wasn't finished. To anyone who still doubts the sincerity of our relationship, I offer this challenge. Look at our actions, not our words. Look at how we support each other's growth, how we handle adversity together, and how we use our combined resources to help others. Judge us by our character, not our circumstances. As she stepped away from the podium to thunderous applause, Kira felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had addressed the rumors directly and honestly, turning potential scandal into an opportunity to demonstrate their values. Brandon met her at the bottom of the stage steps, his eyes shining with pride and love. That was brilliant, he whispered in her ear as he escorted her back to their table. Think it worked? Kira asked. Look around, Brandon said. The ballroom was buzzing with positive energy. People were approaching their table to congratulate them and express support. Even some of the society matrons who had been whispering about their unconventional romance were nodding approval. But the best moment came when Margaret Torres appeared at their table. Kira dear, she said warmly, that was beautifully handled. You've shown remarkable grace under pressure. Thank you, Kira said, touched by the older woman's approval. I believe I owe you an apology, Margaret continued. I was concerned about Brandon's choice, but tonight you've shown me exactly why he fell in love with you. You're precisely the kind of woman this family needs. As the evening wound down, Veronica made one last attempt to cause trouble, approaching their table with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Kira darling, she said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, what a touching speech. Though I do wonder what will happen when the novelty wears off and Brandon realizes what he's given up for this little experiment. Before Brandon could respond, Kira stood up with a smile every bit as sharp as Veronica's. "Veronica," she said pleasantly, "I'm so glad you came tonight. Your presence here really validates the point I was making about character. Some people try to tear others down to make themselves feel better, while others build each other up. Thank you for providing such a clear example of the difference." Several people at nearby tables turned to watch the exchange, and Veronica's face flushed red with embarrassment and anger. "This isn't over," Veronica hissed quietly so only Kira could hear. "Yes, it is," Kira replied calmly. "You've already lost, Veronica. You just haven't figured it out yet." As Veronica stalked away, Brandon pulled Kira into his arms. "Remind me never to get on your bad side," he said with admiration. "You don't have a bad side with me," Kira said, stretching up to kiss him. "You only have a side that gets my fierce protection." Looking around the ballroom at the faces filled with respect and admiration, Kira realized that they had truly turned the corner. The obstacles that had seemed so insurmountable just hours before had been swept away by honesty, dignity, and love. They were going to be fine. Better than fine, they were going to be extraordinary. 1 year later, Kira stood in the bridal suite of the St. Regis Hotel, surrounded by her closest friends and family as she prepared for the most important day of her life. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece of silk and lace, chosen not for its designer label but for the way it made her feel beautiful, confident, and completely herself. "You look absolutely radiant," her mother said, tears shining in her eyes as she fastened the pearl necklace that had belonged to Kira's grandmother. Patricia was healthier and happier than she'd been in years, her heart surgery a complete success that had given her a new lease on life. "I can't believe this is really happening," Kira said, smoothing her hands over the delicate fabric of her dress. "Believe it," said Jennifer, who had become one of Kira's closest friends over the past year. "You've earned every bit of happiness coming your way." The past 12 months had been a whirlwind of professional success and personal joy. Kira had been promoted to senior marketing director, leading a team of 12 and overseeing some of Torres Enterprises' most important accounts. Her innovative approach to authentic marketing had revolutionized the industry, and she was regularly invited to speak at conferences around the world. More importantly, her relationship with Brandon had only grown stronger. They had weathered the storms of public scrutiny and family expectations together, supporting each other through every challenge and celebrating every triumph as a team. "The cars are here," announced Brandon's sister, Elena, peeking her head into the bridal suite. Elena had become like the sister Kira had never had, welcoming her into the Torres family with open arms and genuine affection. As they made their way to the ceremony, Kira's heart raced with anticipation. They had chosen to marry at the Conservatory Garden in Central Park, a beautiful outdoor venue that felt both elegant and intimate. The garden was filled with white roses and soft lighting, creating a romantic atmosphere under the late afternoon sun. The moment Kira stepped into view, she could see Brandon waiting at the altar, and her breath caught in her throat. He looked devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, but it was the expression on his face that made her heart soar, pure joy mixed with reverent love and complete adoration. Patricia walked her daughter down the aisle, and when they reached Brandon, she placed Kira's hand in his with a blessing whispered so quietly only they could hear, "Take care of each other." "Always," Brandon promised, his eyes never leaving Kira's face. The ceremony was beautiful but brief. They had written their own vows, and both wanted to focus on the promises they were making rather than elaborate pageantry. "Kira," Brandon said when it was his turn to speak, "a year and a half ago I thought I knew what love was. I thought it was comfortable and predictable and safe. Then I held you in my arms in the darkness, and I discovered what love actually is: surprising and challenging and absolutely transformative." His voice was steady but filled with emotion as he continued, "You've made me braver, kinder, and more honest than I ever thought possible. You've shown me that real strength comes not from having power over others, but from lifting others up. You've taught me that the best things in life aren't the ones we plan for, but the ones that find us when we're brave enough to open our hearts." Tears streamed down Kira's face as she listened to his words. "I promise to love you not just for who you are today, but for who you're still becoming," Brandon concluded. "I promise to support your dreams, celebrate your successes, and stand by your side through every challenge. I promise to be your partner in every sense of the word, for all the days of our lives." When it was Kira's turn, she took a deep breath and looked into the eyes of the man who had changed her entire world. "Brandon," she began, "when we met, I was lost in more ways than I realized. I thought I knew who I was and what I was capable of, but I was limiting myself based on fear and circumstance. You didn't just offer me opportunities, you helped me see possibilities I'd never even imagined." She paused, gathering her thoughts as she looked out at the faces of their friends and family, people who had become part of their extended support system. "You believed in me before I believed in myself," Kira continued. "But more than that, you gave me the space to prove my own worth. You never tried to rescue me or fix me, you simply loved me and trusted me to find my own strength." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke from her heart. "I promise to love you not because you saved me but because you saw me," she said. "I promise to challenge you, support you, and grow alongside you. I promise to be your partner in building something beautiful together, not just a marriage, but a life filled with purpose, joy, and love that lifts others up the way you lifted me up." She squeezed his hands gently. "I promise to never forget where we came from or take for granted where we're going. And I promise to dance with you in the light the same way I fell in love with you in the darkness." By the time they exchanged rings and were pronounced husband and wife, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. When Brandon kissed his new wife, the applause was thunderous, but all Kira could hear was the beating of her own heart and the whispered, "I love you," against her lips. The reception was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, an elegant affair that somehow managed to feel both sophisticated and warmly personal. Kira had insisted on a guest list that included everyone who had supported them, from her former co-workers at the restaurant to the cleaning staff at Torres Enterprises who had cheered her on during those late nights when she was building her career. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brandon said as he stood to give his speech during dinner, "they say that the best love stories are the ones that surprise you. 18 months ago, if someone had told me that a power outage in a case of mistaken identity would lead to the most important moment of my life, I would have laughed." The guests chuckled appreciatively as Brandon's eyes found Kira's across the elegant ballroom. "But life has a way of bringing us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it," he continued. "Kira didn't just become my wife today, she's been my partner, my inspiration, and my best friend from almost the moment we met. She's made me a better man, a better leader, and hopefully a better husband." He raised his champagne flute. "To my beautiful wife, who taught me that the most valuable things in life can't be bought, sold, or planned for. They can only be recognized, cherished, and protected. To Kira, my unexpected blessing and my greatest joy." When it was Kira's turn to speak, she stood with confidence that would have seemed impossible to the scared waitress she'd been just over a year ago. "I used to think that fairy tales were just stories we told ourselves to feel better about ordinary lives," she said. "I thought that real love was something that happened to other people, people who were luckier, prettier, or more deserving than I was." She looked around the room at the faces of people who had become family. "But I've learned that the best love stories aren't the ones that start with, 'once upon a time,'" she continued. "They're the ones that start with ordinary moments that become extraordinary because of the people who share them. They start with kindness offered without expectation, with second chances given freely, and with two people who choose to build something beautiful together." Her voice grew emotional as she looked at Brandon. "My husband showed me that I was already enough, just as I was. He didn't complete me, he helped me complete myself. And now, together, we get to spend our lives helping others discover their own worth." She raised her own glass. "To Brandon, who saw light in me when I couldn't see it myself. To unexpected beginnings, to love that transforms, and to all of you who believed in us even when we weren't sure we believed in ourselves." As the evening progressed, the celebration became a testament to the community they had built around their love. Kira's mother danced with Brandon's father, both of them beaming with joy. Jennifer and Elena planned future collaborations between their respective fields. Even some of the Torres family's oldest friends admitted that they had never seen Brandon so genuinely happy. The highlight of the evening came when Brandon and Kira took the floor for their first dance as husband and wife. They had chosen At Last by Etta James, a song that perfectly captured their journey from chance encounter to destined love. "No regrets," Brandon whispered as they swayed together under the soft lighting. "Only one," Kira whispered back. Brandon's eyebrows rose in surprise. "What's that?" "I regret that it took a power outage for us to find each other," she said with a smile. "Think of all the time we wasted not knowing each other existed." "I don't think it was wasted time," Brandon said thoughtfully. "I think we both needed to become the people we are now before we could recognize what we meant to each other." "You're probably right," Kira agreed. "I needed to learn my own strength before I could be a true partner to someone as strong as you. And I needed to learn what real love looked like before I could appreciate the gift of loving you," Brandon replied. As the song ended and their guests applauded, they remained in each other's arms for a moment longer, savoring the perfection of the moment. "So what's next, Mrs. Torres?" Brandon asked with a grin. Well, Mr. Torres, Kira replied, I was thinking we could start with our honeymoon, then come back and change the world. I like the sound of that, Brandon said. Any particular part of the world you'd like to change first? I was thinking we could expand the company's scholarship program, Kira said. Help more people get the opportunities one got. Make sure that potential doesn't go to waste just because someone can't afford to develop it. That's my wife, Brandon said with pride. Always thinking about how to lift others up. That's my husband, Kira countered. Always ready to turn good ideas into reality. 6 months later, the Torres Foundation had distributed over $5 million in educational scholarships and business development grants. Kira had taken a leave of absence from her marketing role to oversee the foundation's operations, discovering a new passion for philanthropy that felt like a natural extension of her journey. The scholarship recipients want to name the program after you, Brandon told her one evening as they reviewed the foundation's quarterly reports in their home office. Absolutely not, Kira said immediately. This isn't about recognition. It's about opportunity. What about the Second Chances Scholarship Program? Brandon suggested. That honors the spirit without making it personal. Perfect, Kira agreed. Because that's what this is really about, making sure that one moment, one opportunity, one chance encounter can change everything for someone else. As they worked together late into the evening, reviewing applications from young people whose stories reminded them so much of Kira's own journey, they marveled at how their lives had evolved. The scared waitress and the lonely billionaire had become partners in every sense of the word, using their combined resources and influence to create opportunities for others. Do you ever miss it? Brandon asked as they finally closed the laptops and prepared for bed. The simplicity of your old life? Never, Kira said without hesitation. I don't miss being scared about money or worried about my mother's health or feeling like I had no control over my future. But I do remember those feelings, and they make me grateful for everything we have now. Good, Brandon said, pulling her into his arms. Because I have big plans for our future, Mrs. Torres. What kind of plans? Kira asked, though she could guess from the sparkle in his eyes. The kind that involve expanding our family, Brandon said softly. If you're ready for that adventure. Kira's heart swelled with joy. I'm ready for any adventure as long as it's with you. 2 years later, as Kira held their newborn daughter in her arms while Brandon read a bedtime story to their adopted son, a bright 8-year-old they'd met through the foundation's mentorship program, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. The little girl, Sophia, had Brandon's dark eyes and Kira's determined chin. Their son, Marcus, had been living in foster care when they'd met him during a foundation event, and his quick wit and resilient spirit had captured their hearts immediately. And they all lived happily ever after, Brandon concluded, closing the storybook and kissing Marcus's forehead. Is that really how stories end? Marcus asked thoughtfully. With everything being perfect forever? Not perfect, Kira said gently, adjusting baby Sophia in her arms. But happy. The best stories don't end with everything being perfect, they end with people loving each other enough to face whatever comes next together. Like how you and Dad found each other? Marcus asked. Exactly like that, Brandon confirmed. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life start with accidents or mistakes or moments when everything seems to go wrong. But they're only beautiful if we're brave enough to believe in them, Kira added. And if we're willing to work hard to deserve the good things that come our way. Later that evening, after both children were asleep, Kira and Brandon sat on their terrace overlooking the city, marveling at how their lives had unfolded. Do you think they'll believe us when they're older? Kira asked, resting her head on Brandon's shoulder. When we tell them their love story started with a power outage and a case of mistaken identity? They'll believe it because they'll see the evidence of it every day, Brandon said, stroking her hair. They'll see how we love each other, how we support each other, and how we never stop being grateful for the chance encounter that brought us together. I love our life, Kira said simply. So do I, Brandon agreed. All of it. The challenges we've overcome, the success we've built, the family we've created, and most of all, the love that started it all. As they sat together under the stars, Kira thought about the woman she'd been on that fateful night 18 months ago. That woman would never have imagined this life was possible, the career success, the devoted husband, the beautiful family, the ability to help others achieve their own dreams. But that woman had possessed something precious without realizing it. The courage to accept love when it was offered, the determination to prove herself worthy of it, and the wisdom to fight for what truly mattered. The power outage that had brought them together had lasted only 20 minutes. But the love that began in those 20 minutes of darkness had illuminated every day since. creating a life more beautiful than either of them had ever dared to dream. And as Brandon had promised on their wedding day, it was only the beginning of their happily ever after. Dear readers, thank you for joining Kira and Brandon on their incredible journey from a chance encounter to true love. This story reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin in the most unexpected ways. I'd love to hear from you. What was your favorite moment in Kira and Brandon's story? Do you believe in love at first sight, or do you think the best relationships grow from friendship and mutual respect like theirs did? Have you ever had a chance encounter that changed your life? And what do you think made Brandon and Kira's relationship work so well despite the challenges they faced? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights and experiences make these stories even more meaningful.